Hello and welcome back to the History of Video Games. My name is Ben and I'm joined by the one and only Wes. How you doing, Wes?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's weird because the clock's just changed and we're really recording this like a lot later than usual, but I don't know. I'm like weirdly awake still. So
yeah, my brain doesn't know what's going on, but
I know. I'm just confused right now, I just want to say.
It's going to be a delirious episode.
That's okay. What you been playing though? I mean, I feel like you're always changing it up. What's going on?
I'm still keeping true to that. I would say most of what I played this past week was Genshin. Still good. Still love it, but don't want to talk about it again. At least not for a while. But the new game that I've been checking out that I wanted to talk about is the newest expansion for Pokemon Sword and Shield, the Crown Tundra. Okay. It just came out, I want to say 2 weeks ago. And
which expansion is this? Like the third one?
Second. And there was a season pass sort of deal for these two expansions. So I don't know if it's like a yearly plan thing. I don't really know like what Pokemon expansion schedules even look like. I feel like usually they just release a new game. So I'm not sure if it's the last one or not, but it's the last announced one, as far as I know, called the Crown Tundra, and it's a pretty big one compared to the first one, the Isle of Armor, that came out, which was pretty good, but didn't have like tons of stuff. And of course, one of the big problems people had with the base game when it came out is that not all of the Pokemon from all the previous games were in it. They just like left a bunch of them out. So like part of the content of both these expansions are like, here's 100 of the other Pokemon that weren't in it before.
Right.
So I think that burns people a little bit. But as I said before, since I only played like Gen 1 and Gen 2 and that was it, everything's new to me. So it's still working out all right for me. But it's pretty good. The story's ridiculous. And I forgot how strange Pokemon games can get. There's this like psychic legendary who just mind controls this guy who you're hanging out with to speak through him so it can talk to you. And then you're just having like a normal conversation with this Pokemon. It's so strange. But I think they're all the games are like that. I probably just didn't realize it when I was younger. Like they're pretty out there.
Yeah.
So that's very weird, but very fun. And my favorite part of it so far is that they decided they like to do regional forms. So there's a couple Galarian forms of Pokemon that they did in this generation. And with this DLC, they did Galarian forms of the original 3 legendary birds. So totally switched it up. There's a new Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres. And for whatever reason, they're no longer fire, ice, and lightning or electric types. It's pretty cool the way that they did it, though. Like, it makes sense with the design. One of them's dark, one of them's psychic, and one of them's fighting type now. So, yeah, it's weird. I really like it. I don't know if like diehard fans of the originals are like, this is a travesty or what the general reaction is, but it's been good so far. It's a lot of content, and one of the main things I've been pouring time into instead of doing the story is this max raid battle dungeon thing. One of the big gameplay features of the main game is fighting these like giant versions of Pokemon in these big 4v1 kind of raids. But they added this new game mode where you just get a random Pokemon instead of using one from your team, and you have to like fight 3 Dynamaxed Pokemon on your way to fighting the big legendary one to catch it. And each time you fight one, you could say, okay, switch that out for the random one that I got. I want to use this one instead. So it's this weird, you have like paths that you can choose. I wouldn't call it a roguelike or anything like that, but it's this really interesting take on it. I've been having a lot of fun with that. And also somebody found out that the chance for any of the Pokemon that you catch in that place to be shiny is 1 out of 300, which I feel like is really good odds compared to what it usually is. And it also means like someone super casual like me might get one instead of, like soft resetting the game to load one encounter for 12 hours straight, which is what a lot of people do. And nothing against it if that's your thing, but I could not do that. Like, if I find it naturally, cool. If not, I'm kind of out of there, unless it's like my favorite or something. So I really like that. It's a bit weird. Doesn't make sense from a lore perspective because they just dumped into this area like every single legendary from all the other games, so they're just all like hanging out. But it's cool and it's added content. I've been enjoying it. Yeah, I'm always having fun with Pokemon stuff when I'm in the mood for it.
Now I'm just thinking about what a good Pokemon game would be if it was like a roguelike. I think that would actually be really good.
Yeah, I feel like they've done some weird stuff that's not base game. Like there's one called like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon that I've never even played.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, it might actually be something like that, but I'm not too sure. Who knows? There's a lot of properties under that name, I feel
Yeah.
like. But that's pretty much what I've been doing. What have you been playing recently?
I've been getting back into my Lord of the Rings game, Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, because I took a break from it for a while when we were doing research and I couldn't play any games. And now that that's done, I wanted to get back into it. And it's weird because I thought I had in my head exactly where I stopped when I was previously playing. And I've just been playing this game more and more and more. I'm like about 75% way through the game by now. And I have never gotten to that place. So either I'm thinking of a different game or I passed it like a long time ago. But it's interesting. I think the last time I talked about it on the podcast, I had just beaten the Balrog and it took me 2 attempts. And since then, the difficulty of the game has gone up dramatically. I've died many times now. I even had to go back and just grind for a while, which was annoying, but I guess it worked. And so I went through the Elven Forest area. I went through Rohan. From there, we went to Helm's Deep and then Osgiliath, and now I'm in Minas Tirith. And I feel like I'm making good progress, but it's really hard, and the game is just like absolutely brutal to you sometimes. Like you'll just get completely stun locked, and then you'll be like, "Oh, you think you're gonna stun me? Well, I'll use my stunning attack on you," and then they'll be like, "Immune." And you're like, "Oh, I guess that's I'm just gonna lose now." But I've always gotten past it so far. It hasn't been too terrible. There was a section where they legit just separated my healer from the rest of the party, and I had to play through a bunch of mini boss battles with no healer. And I was like, what is going on?
That doesn't sound great.
I know. It's like, why couldn't you take anyone else? You had to take that person. But I'm still enjoying it. I'm going through it and still looking forward to playing. I think I might need to grind again soon, but I'm kind of mentally preparing myself for that. I'm like okay about it. Have no clue how the ending is going to be. The story is not really there. Like, you know, the characters mainly just by battling with them, but the actual story between the characters is just like things happen, and then you're like, was there any prep for that I missed earlier? You know, it's like maybe relationships happening or some sort of backstory that's like just casually mentioned, and you're like, well, where did that come from? You know, but in general, you're following kind of like the Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli storyline, and you get a lot of just straight up cutscenes from the movie. So really, you're just like more interested in that than the real characters. But I think it's totally okay because I would love to follow in their footsteps too. So
Right, yeah.
it's been pretty fun. I'm looking forward to getting towards the end because I think I only have Minas Tirith and then one more area, and I think that's it. So I'm getting up there now.
Yeah, so hopefully that grind you have to do is the last one, but
Yeah, I hope so. But we'll see. Who knows? I feel like some of those talent trees, like I have on my healer character, the number one special move unlocked on for her already. So it's just like getting maybe some of the other characters up
right.
that I need to worry about. So that's all I've been doing. I'll let you know what happens. But in the meantime, should we check out the Cosmic VIP, Wes computer?
Oh yeah.
All right, let me start it off. The history of the Cosmic VIP is kind of a long story. I'm going to try to summarize it a little bit. There was a computer before the Cosmic VIP. Both of these were developed mainly by a guy named Joseph Weisbecker, who Wes is going to talk about a little bit later. But it started with the Cosmic Elf. And the elf was, I think, just like think Joseph Weisbecker basically made his own little computer and then tried to sell it to the RCA company, and then together they made this Elf. But we never covered it, even though it came out in '76, because there's not really any graphics for it. It just has an LED display of like two numbers, I think, and that's it. So kind of like a calculator. But it had all the power and resources to be equivalent to something like an Altair, I believe, which we have talked about before. But it started with the Elf, and I think it was mainly a hobbyist computer that just did very basic stuff. But then in '77, they're going to come out with the Cosmic VIP, which is their next kind of level. The insides, I think, are very similar to the Elf, but it adds a video chip, and I think it's marketed for a more. I mean, it's marketed towards hobbyists, definitely. For one thing, it doesn't come pre-assembled; you had to assemble it at home. But it has a lot more functionality to it, so you can hook it up to a TV or a computer monitor. It also had a keyboard, but weirdly, it was a hex keyboard, which basically looks like a numpad with like A, B, C, D on it, I think, which is kind of strange. So I guess everything you inputted on this computer was in hex, which is like computers use it, but it's basically like counting to 16 instead of like a 10-digit kind of number system. So it had that. It launched at a price of $275, which I think is relatively cheap. I think the Apple II was maybe double that or so.
Yeah.
But in today's money, it's about $1,000. So they were definitely looking for going for a very cheap computer that was fairly strong in terms of its power. The graphics chip on it, or the display chips, it used something called Pixie graphics, which look eerily similar to the RCA Studio 2's graphics, which I was like, oh god. But we'll talk about that later, maybe. It also launched with a weird kind of operating system. It was called the Chip 8 programming language, which to my knowledge, nobody really used. You could buy Tiny Basic for it as a standalone kind of expansion or piece of software, but it seems strange to not launch with that in '77. So it's just kind of a weird one. I don't think it really took off that much, but we're going to start seeing some games for it this year that we're going to talk about later today. So I thought it'd be a good time to bring it up. But yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like kind of reminds me of the Holy Trinity in that it has a display and has a keyboard, but you had to build it yourself. It was a hex keyboard. It wasn't basic. And although the display chip was pretty good, I want to say, it wasn't in color. So I don't know. It seems a little behind the times. I feel like it tried to do something different and it just didn't really take off.
Yeah, I could see that. And it seems to be more geared towards that hobbyist crowd, like you were saying, since you have to kind of construct it yourself. But just to give a little bit background on Joseph Weisbecker, who created this and also created the RCA Studio 2. So hence why some of those graphical elements might look similar. We already talked about his daughter too, who might come up later, Joyce Weisbecker. She's the first woman to design a video game, or at least a commercial video game. And she also did create some of the games that are going to come out for the Cosmac VIP. So Joseph, the computer that Ben was talking about that he created at home was called the Fred, which stood for Flexible Recreational and Educational Device. And basically, he took the microprocessor from that to RCA and said, hey, look at this, isn't this cool? And they did think it was cool. And so then they based several different products off of that architecture, which then led to the whole Cosmac series of computers that Ben already talked about. And there is this little tidbit that we found that's going to be relevant to one of the games we talk about later today, where the microprocessor and sort of the architecture and design from the original Fred computer was going to go into a microprocessor arcade cabinet, or several arcade cabinets that were going to be released by RCA. But then those were play tested and people didn't really like them, so they just didn't even get released. So there's these, I think, like 5 or 6 games that kind of people know were made at least in a prototype state using the same thing that the Cosmac runs on, or at least a very similar chip, but never came out. And so, as Ben mentioned, Joseph Weisbecker actually was the person who created the Chip 8 language when he was making these computers. And it was apparently intended to be a simple language that would make it easier for keyboard and video elements to interact. And since I don't really know how that worked in other computers, I can't really say whether this worked better or worse, but it is interesting that it was kind of just, he made a whole new language for this instead of just using BASIC like so many others have.
Mm-hmm.
But as Ben mentioned, that also kind of makes it less accessible if everyone's used to BASIC. But interestingly enough, the Wikipedia for Chip 8 says that it is used, or at least was used, in the TI Texas Instruments 38 calculators. They were still using that language somehow. And also, this 1802 chip, which was another one of Joseph Weisbecker's creations, is still in production today. I don't know if it has many uses, but it is one of the few early, like 77, 78 microprocessors that are still being produced today, which seems very strange. I think there's satellites in space that have been using them for 3 decades and they're still running or something crazy like that.
That's awesome.
And then just a little bit of background on the location where all of this was happening. It was at the RCA Laboratories in New Jersey, which is also called the David Sarnoff Research Center. And the research center itself had been around since, I think, the early 40s. And they just had kind of tons of crazy, small technological innovations, but huge stuff too, like inventing or at least developing, I think, the first electron microscope. So they kind of cover the whole gamut of stuff. And it's interesting to think that this cool, niche, weird gaming computer, or at least computer that had games on it, was coming from that same area.
Sounds like another field trip.
Yeah, there you go. I think it's still around. And that's about all I had on it. Yeah, so that's the Cosmac VIP. It's a bit weird. I don't really understand like much about what's going on with it, but it's interesting. I think it had an educational bend to it, a lot like the RCA Studio 2 did. So we might see that reflected in some of the games that come out.
To me, it kind of feels a lot like Joseph Weisbecker's like personal creation, and then somehow he sold it to a big company who tried to mass produce it, even though it wasn't really like. I don't see how it would have really taken off.
Right.
I mean, the keyboard isn't even a real keyboard. It's very strange, but we are gonna continue talking about it because we're gonna get into some games here. So let's jump right into that.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that musical interlude. Ben, why don't you get us started off on some of these games?
All right, so to start us off today, we've got an interesting one, we'll say. This came out in the Kilobod magazine for their January issue. It was called Rocket Pilot, and it was made by Bob Bishop. And this is another version of Lunar Lander. And I know what you're saying, Wes. Why are we even considering this? We've covered Lunar Lander at least twice now, I want to say. But it is one of the most popular games of this era. I actually read when I was researching this a bit that in 1978, I think in one of the creative computing magazines, it said like Lunar Lander is like the number one game for computers at this time.
Wow.
I think the original text-based version as well, which is crazy to me, but let's talk about this one, because the reason why I wanted to cover this one is kind of two reasons. Number one, we've got color graphics, which is the first time I've ever seen it in a Lunar Lander game. And then the other thing is this is the first like accessible Lunar Lander game that has both vertical and horizontal movement. Because up until this point, it's all been vertical. The kind of crux of the game really is you either like have to begin the engines and launch a rocket and then slow it down to a stopping point, or in some of the other ones we've seen, it just starts by falling and you just have to kind of control the thrusters, usually all text-based, using like math and weird formulas,
right?
so that you stop at 2 miles an hour and not 100 miles an hour and crash and burn. But in this version, it plays more like a real game, which is great. You still have the velocities you have to keep track of, but you're not like inputting numbers. It's real time, and you're just kind of like pushing buttons, and that's like the thrust, you know? Basically, as long as you're turning on and off the thrusters correctly and kind of slowing yourself before you hit the bottom of the ground, you won't crash, and that's kind of what the game is. In this version, it's a little different. You start from a grounded position, and then you have to launch and then go over a mountain kind of deal, and then land in another valley on the other side of the mountain.
Hmm.
So you're kind of in one valley, you have to go over a mountain and then back into a valley. And basically, what you're looking at on the screen is just a little sprite of a rocket ship, which is like pink or purple, which is a little strange. You basically have the outline of the mountain with actually sections of it that are green, which indicate the landing zones you need to go to, which is a nice touch, I thought. And then your fuel and velocities and time are below. Time counts up, so I think it's purely a like high score kind of deal with that. When I was playing, I never ran out of fuel. You could set how much fuel you wanted to have, so maybe that's just kind of a custom way to do difficulty. I'm not totally sure. There's actually two versions of this game I want to quickly say. One is straight from the Kilobod magazine, which I looked at, and then another one is by Bob Bishop and PowerSoft, and it's basically just like the one that they're selling to people. You know, it's slightly improved, but the core gameplay is the same, so I'm kind of covering both of them here. The only upgrades, quote unquote, that they had was they added a new sound effect for when you crash and a new kind of blinking, like you crashed animation thing. But that's basically it. The whole gameplay, almost all the graphics are exactly the same. So I'm just decided to cover both here, even though the better quality one maybe comes out a little bit later. But yeah, I think that's just about all you guys need to know. The controls for it are super strange. This is the first time I ever played an Apple II game. And basically, you had 3 numpad buttons. One was like move left, one was move right, and one was like thrusters going upwards, and then going down is just gravity, so you just like turn off the thrusters to go down. And then you had a turn on thruster button for the horizontal movements, and then turn on thruster button for the vertical movement. And those were the 2 alt keys, which was kind of a strange combination, but it worked, and I got it. And I was able to do a successful landing, although it said I was poor, so don't know what that means. But overall, I've played worse Lunar Lander games. So let me get into my ratings. I gave it, for gameplay, just a 1.5 out of 10. I mean, I will say this game is by far the best Lunar Lander game I've played to date, but that's a pretty low bar, you know? The thing about it that is good is, even though you're dealing with velocities and stuff, you don't really have to pay attention to any of that. I mean, you just have to slow down or speed up and make sure you're turning on and off the thrusters at the right time, and you're going to be able to play the game. So it felt a lot more like a game than a text-based or mathy kind of thing, which was great. For the graphics, I just gave it a 1.75 out of 10. I think this is one of the better parts about the game. The sprite for the rocket ship looks okay. It looks pretty good. The mountains actually seem to be slightly randomized. It's always in a like kind of W shape where you're in one valley, you go over a mountain, and then you land in another valley. But the actual mountain, I think, is somewhat random, or maybe that's only in one of the versions. I'm not sure if it's in both. But like just the general shape of that mountain's a little different. It all plays the same. At the end of the day, it's kind of like a triangle mountain, you know, and it's just like how jagged are the edges.
Right.
But it's kind of a nice little touch, I thought. And I thought having it be in color, I mean, this is Apple II, which is definitely capable of doing colors, and I think the colors look pretty nice. And in that newer version, you have a nice little explosion animation thing, and actually kind of blows up part of the line where you crash into that represents the mountain. It kind of goes away. It just comes back again once you get a new life. So it's not really anything that lasts, but it's a nice little touch. And considering I don't think we've ever played a Lunar Lander game that was in color or had like mountains. I mean, it's significantly better, but there's still a lot lacking from it too. Like we have played, I think it was the Commodore PET had a Lunar Lander where you could kind of see the thrusters if you were pressing them. You got like these larger flames coming out of the bottom, and you don't have any of that here. So that's kind of something that's like missing from the game. I think it looks kind of strange because the rocket ship it also doesn't really like turn. It's more just like it floats straight up and then straight over or something.
Right.
I mean, it goes a little diagonal, but the model never turns. So it's not like great, and the whole background's just black, but it's way better than it used to be. So, I mean, it used to be no graphics at all, just text. For sound, I gave it 1.25. In the old version, you just get like a bleep bloop kind of sound. And it's only when you die or like restart the game. That's actually the case in both versions. When you're actually playing the game, there's no sound whatsoever, which is very stark and just quiet. In the new version, they do have a nice little crash sound. It's nothing crazy, but honestly, I think an engine noise would have been much better to have. But yeah, I think it's one of the weaker parts, but it does have some sound, which again, I don't know if any of the other ones did. So give it a couple points there. For relevance, I went kind of high. I went 7.5 out of 10, and that's just because like Lunar Lander is really popular, and I'm almost positive that this version is really popular as well. I mean, it was published in a very popular magazine. Like the whole source code was in there too. So I mean, who knows how many people just copied it from that? But then they also sold it later too, which kind of tells me maybe there was some sort of demand for it on cassette tape as well. So I think this is one of the more influential lunar landers. I mean, it's in color, like I mentioned. You can go vertical and horizontal, and in my mind, moving a spaceship around in 4 dimensions, it's not that big of a leap for instead of going from valley to valley to go from objective A to objective B, and maybe that's in a lot of very different settings or directions, or maybe there's wind involved. Like, I think there's a whole bunch of possibilities for this kind of game, and now that a lot of the math stuff is out of the window and is actually you're just kind of it's more of like a timing based thing, really. I feel like it opens up the possibility for it to influence a lot more games down the line. So I wanted to keep that kind of high. And then overall, I just gave it a 1.5 out of 10. Like I mentioned, it's not the worst Lunar Lander game in the world. It's probably the best one that we've played, but it's not that fun. I mean, I'm not shooting tank shells at people, so, you know, what can I say? At the end of the day, you're taking off with a rocket, going over a mountain and landing it. How many times can you do that and have it be a fun time? I don't know. For me, it was like I wanted to land it once, and then once I did that, I felt pretty good. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So for people that like this type of game, maybe it's the next big thing. But for me, as good as the improvements are, I'm still looking for more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And on the Apple II as well, I'm sure that makes it a pretty relevant and popular game, especially for people at the time if they were super interested in it. But I can understand how for us looking back, it's like, okay, yeah, but like what gameplay is there?
Right. It's weird because I feel like it's quite a bit different from like the original Lunar Lander games, because they were all text based and very mathy. And I think in the Commodore PET version, it started to become a little bit more gamey, and this one seems much more gamey. I don't think it's going to be too much of a leap until it just becomes a game, you know?
Right.
And it's not really that far off from like Snake, for instance. I mean, you're not going all the time. You can turn on and off the thrusters, but you're just kind of getting from point A to point B, you know?
Yeah. It's only 2 steps away from Flappy Bird, you know?
Yeah, exactly. We're saying this influenced Flappy Bird.
Right, directly.
This one does feel kind of next gen to me, you know? Because it did add a lot to it. Color, good graphics, and the horizontal movement. So I'm very interested to see what the next gen from Rocket Pilot might be. I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for it. We'll see what happens.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds cool. I mean, there's a lot of exciting stuff to get into as we talk about the Apple II in 1978, and
Yeah.
with that transition there, our next honorable mentions are going to be from the Apple II Red Book, which was the manual in 1978 that came out in January, which had a couple games in it. One that we want to talk about is Pong for the Apple II, which was by Wendell Bitter, and it was actually written back in July of 77, but it was just now being published with the code available so that other people could play it. And it allowed you to play Pong or handball, and it looks like they were likely in color too, as with most things that we're seeing on the Apple II.
Pretty cool. And also in that red book, there was a game called Dragon Maze. I thought about looking into this and maybe reviewing it, but there's actually going to be later this year a version called Advanced Dragon Maze. So I figure we'll just play it then, which it just seems like a better version of Dragon Maze.
Right.
So we'll do that. And then also in the red book, there was a Mastermind game, which we've seen a lot. So just wanted to mention it. But moving away from the Apple II for a second, let's talk about some arcade machines. This is weird, Wes. There's a lot of these. But I think the number one cloned game in 78 is Breakout, which seems strange because I think that came out 2 years ago now.
Right, yeah.
But there are a lot of clones. So let's just talk about a couple right now. And I think I spaced them out a little bit over the course of the year. But we have here Attacker, also known as Table Attacker, and also Table Attacker Black, Table Attacker High Speed, Table Attacker Specials, all by Nichibutsu, which came out in January 78 for at least Attacker, and I think March of 78 for the variants, but I'm just putting them all together because they're all seem to be Breakout clones, and we don't have any real video or emulation of them, just flyers and stuff. But they're the first games by Nichibutsu, which its parent company is Nihon Busan, so some of them are under that name for people looking for them.
And then next up, continuing with the clones, we have Break Open by Sega, which cracks me up because it's a Breakout clone, and Table Block, Power Block, and PT Block by IREM/IPM. All of them were early 78, and then again, all of them were Breakout clones that we don't have too much info on.
Yeah. And then moving on from that, we've got Clowns by Midway, which came out in January of 78. Now, I thought about rating this one as well because we do have the emulation for it. There are a lot of videos on it as well. It's basically their version of Circus by Exidy, which was Wes's favorite game of last year. So I definitely had an inclination to play it and review it, but the actual gameplay and the visuals look identical.
Oh, okay.
I really didn't see any differences. It did play its own music though, which my theory is since Circus played the funeral theme and Boot Hill plays the funeral theme, which is a Midway product, they didn't want to have the funeral theme in Clowns, is my guess. So they changed all the music. So I wanted to do a little extended mention here and just play you guys the music in Clowns because I think it is a couple tunes. So enjoy that and we'll catch you on the other side. So I hope you like that. We're going to keep it going. There is another Circus by Exidy clone here called Circus Circus by Universal, which came out in January as well. So a lot of Circus clones, actually, this year. We're going to see even more than those two mentions, I believe.
Nice. Okay. Proof it wasn't just me who thought it was a good game.
Yeah.
And then next up, we have the Creative Computing January-February issue, which just had Yahtzee.
Yep.
That's it.
Does anybody care about that? No. There might have been like other games, but that was the only one that seemed interesting, and maybe not even that. But let's move on to the Cosmic stuff because we mentioned that in the opening segment. So let's get into some of these Cosmic VIP games. We're going to start with their manual that they published in February of 78. It had a lot of the first games for the computer on it, including Snake Race and Jackpot, which we know were confirmed games that Joyce worked on. So she worked on some RCA Studio 2 stuff, but I think these are her first computer games. Snake Race, which I think is a horse betting type game, and Jackpot, which is another kind of gambling casino game. But also in this Cosmic VIP manual, they had stuff like Wipe Off, which played kind of a clean sweep game. They had Space Intercept, figure shooting at a moving target, and Armored Vehicle Clash, which are all shooting kind of games. One called Dot Dash, which the description made it sound like a racing game, and another called Amazing, which is a maze type game. All of these we don't have video or emulation of, but we do have the code. But it's even weirder than usual because it's like, what is it called, Wes? C dash or something?
Chip 8.
Yeah, chip 8 code. So, or it's like in hex or something. So yeah, it's a little strange.
And then we have a couple more Cosmac games, which were either, some of them were released in a magazine called Quest Data, and then some of them we're not really sure where they were released in, but it doesn't seem like they were part of a larger manual. And for those, we had Target Game, Ping Pong, Bridget, Mora, Mousetrap, and then one of the more interesting ones, Swords, aka Sword Fighter. So going back to our special topic, when I briefly mentioned that there were these microprocessor arcade games that almost came out in 1975, there was one of them called Swords, which was a sword fighting game, basically looked like an RCA Studio 2 game based on what the emulation that someone has available for this. And Sword Fighter, which would later come out for a Cosmac system, which we're not too sure how different it is, but it's a pretty interesting game in itself just based on the fact that it's evolution of swords. So just looking at the swords gameplay and talking about it. So these were both made, as far as we know, by Joseph Weisbecker as well. And they honestly had pretty cool sprites for two sword fighters. I mean, they took up most of the screen. It was just these two characters, and that's all that was going on. But like, one of them had his hand over his head and his sword straight out, and the other one had a different pose going on. So it was really dramatic sword fighting poses for these blocky characters. And the gameplay, basically, it looks like you can move your character in 4 different directions. And I couldn't tell from the way that the controls were laid out on the emulator I was watching, but it looks like you could also move your sword in 3 different positions.
Yeah.
I don't think it automatically moved, although one of the, either a computer character or one player was just constantly moving their sword in the videos that we were watching. But I'm pretty sure you could select the 3 different positions, and basically you have to hit the other player by running into them in an area where their sword isn't blocking. So you could like point your sword up, walk under them, and then kind of hit them in the foot, and you would get a point, and then everyone would respawn. And then when you get a point, the points show up under you on the screen. And if you hit the other player's sword, a noise plays and neither player takes a hit. So you can kind of just be like locked in this almost like lightsaber clash moment with these two swords hitting each other, which is pretty funny. And that's kind of it. And as far as we know, Sword Fighter, the one for the Cosmac system that we assume came out around 78, was pretty similar to that. But even though it's so simple, it's a really cool concept to see coming out of both a 1975 and 1978 game. It reminds me a lot of Nidhogg, for those of you who know that, which is a weird 2D sword fighting tug of war type game. Mm-hmm. And in that game, I forget if you have 2 or 3 positions, but basically you just have to guess like which way your opponent's going and then like quickly stab them, and then one hit you're dead, and then you advance to the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
That of course is very fast and very linear, and this is much slower paced, but it's still awesome to see the idea of like sword positions and movement and blocking and like that kind of gameplay in this really simple form back in 75. It makes sense that people are attracted to the idea of sword fighting, so obviously they want to put it in games, but it's just really cool seeing it show up this early in gaming history. And that's pretty much all I had for Swords and Sword Fighter, but I don't know, it's just like this weird, neat concept that we haven't seen much of in gaming history yet.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool one.
And it was really fun to take a look at, and originally I was going to rate this one, but we just didn't feel like there was enough information there to give it kind of a fair rating. So I'm only going to be rating 1 this episode towards the very end, but wanted to at least mention this one a little bit more in depth so you guys have an idea of how cool it is and interesting in the history of video games.
Yeah, definitely super cool. but it was like an unreleased game that came out, or supposed to come out like years ago. So
Right.
definitely maybe doesn't stand up with the games coming out today.
Yes, very true.
But let's keep it moving though. This next one I did review as well. It's called Ultra Tank. It's the big game for today, and man, I was disappointed here, Wes.
Oh no.
I know. This is the first mainline tank game by Key Games we've seen since Tank 8, which, when did that come out? Like, it came out in April of 76, so 2 years ago. And I kind of went into this thinking, oh, Ultra Tank, that's a great name. It's going to be like the next big tank game, because Tank was always a big game. You know, everybody loves Tank. It's one of the most copied games ever, I think, in this early history. This is a mainline game from like the original studio. So I was kind of going into this thinking it's going to be all that. And instantly I load up some videos and get into it, and it's black and white. And I was like, what?
Oh no.
Why is it in black and white? Because Tank 8, which came out 2 years ago, had color. So I was like, what, why? Why is this in black and white? I don't think there's any good reason. And then the gameplay really feels like this whole arcade cabinet was literally Atari slash Key Games taking the tank games from Combat and being like, let's just put these on an arcade cabinet without really doing anything else. So, like, the main improvements, quote unquote, of this game are there's a lot of different variations that you can turn on and off. So
Right.
you can make it so you have guided missiles or straight missiles, or make it so that the missiles bounce off walls. There's an invisible tank mode. There's an open playfield and a playfield with barriers. Oh, and you can also set it so that only one missile fires at a time, so only one missile is on the screen at a time, or you can fire two at a time. But that's kind of it. Like, those are the variations, and they're all like buttons on the cabinet or little switches. Because there's switches in a lot of cases, when you turn one of them on, it'll force turning off something else. So, for example, you can't have guided missiles that bounce off the walls. Is either one or the other. So you can't have like every single possible variation on at the same time. But, you know, you still have a lot of variation there, and you can choose which one you want to play, which is cool. But other than that, I mean, it's just simple tank, only 2 players. There is an AI mode if you just are by yourself, but I don't know. Like, I was just expecting a lot more, because everything that I just talked about, the Atari 2600 console cartridge game could do, and that one was in color, and that one had plane and jet fighter games.
Right.
So,
And if I remember right, at least some of those variations you could apply together too. I don't know if you could do all of them, but I remember looking at like grids of variations, and it's like, hey, if you do like invisible tank and guided missile or something, you have like this type of game now.
yeah, I think you could do that here too, but it was strange that you just couldn't turn all of them on or off. Like, some of them were back and forth.
Right.
So, for example, the open playfield and the playfield with barricades, you could only be one or the other. I mean, it kind of makes sense, I guess, but it was just kind of a weird implementation of it, I thought. Especially considering this is like a arcade cabinet game. I just kind of assume it can handle more or do more things or have more variations. And it seems like all of the stuff we've seen on a console, and it's looked arguably better. So, yeah, I was a little disappointed when I found out that this seems kind of just like a console ripoff almost. But let me get into my scores. For gameplay, I still give it a 2.75 out of 10. It's still a fun game. You still have a lot of variations to choose from, which we have seen one or two arcade cabinets with kind of user set variations that they can change on the spot. But it is pretty rare to see that in an arcade cabinet. So, you know, it's still a fun tank game. But weirdly enough, like, a lot of the things that I don't like about Tank still aren't fixed. So, for example, when someone gets hit, they don't respawn somewhere. they just like their tank does a little exploding animation and they stay right where they at, so you can just get chain stunned.
Right. Oh
Which
no.
it's been an issue since the very first tank game, and it's not fixed at all here. Also, one weird thing, I'm not sure what exactly did this, but I've seen videos where people seem to get kind of pushed through a mine, or maybe the mine exploded or something. I'm not totally sure how that works, but there could be collision. I think you also lose lives if you just hit a wall or drive into it, which the controls didn't seem to be the greatest. You have a lot of freedom with the directions that you're turning. You probably have maybe like upwards of like 12 or 16 different angles, from north to south and all the way back around. But I think that makes it hard to kind of go exactly where you want to go, especially with this cabinet use the actual tank joystick configuration where you basically have two joysticks, and if like they go both
Right.
go forward, that's your forward. So I always think about it for some reason like construction work or equipment controls. But they had that set up. So I think driving seemed like it would be pretty hard. The guided missile mode made it so that once you fired the missiles, your actual tank wouldn't move at that point because you were just driving the bullets, kind of, which seemed to be pretty accurate and pretty, like, you could really turn 90-degree turns with those bullets, but it did leave your tank open. So I don't know if it's like the best implementation of that either, but it's just kind of a strange one. Like, it's fun, but there's still some things that I would have expected from like a next gen version of Tank that are not here. It feels a little outdated. For graphics, this is like the biggest hit. I just gave it a 1.5. It's in black and white. The tanks look better than they do on the 2600, but I would say arguably the 2600 is somehow more iconic or nostalgic feeling than these ones. I don't think they look like the greatest tank models ever. They look a little bit more detailed, but not a lot. So I don't know. It seems like if I'm going back and forth between the 2600 and this whole arcade cabinet, I might choose the 2600 just because it's in color and the playfields look different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the playfield selection here is either a complete gray screen or one with white barriers and black X's, which are mines. And that's it. Like, we've seen all that before 2 years ago, and it's looked better 2 years ago. So to me, that's like the biggest hit for this one. For sound, I gave it 2 out of 10. Again, it's kind of everything I expected. There's a shooting sound, there's an engine noise, there's a explosion sound, but again, they're all things I've kind of heard before. There wasn't anything special. Like, I went back and I listened to the 2600 combat, and with the bouncing off the walls, it had these different pong noises that it made, which I thought was actually pretty cool. But there's nothing like that here. It's very basic and simple. Nothing sounded bad, but it just wasn't next gen at all. No music, or anything like that.
Right.
Before I forget, I did kind of skip this with the graphics, but the explosion animation when you get shot does look a lot better, I think. It's just kind of like a particle cloud thing. I'm not quite sure how the best way to describe it, but I think it looks okay, and it does keep score and time for you. But I don't know. And then for relevance, I gave it just a 3 out of 10. I mean, it feels like this is copying the console, so obviously the console is more relevant than this one. And compared to the earlier tank games, I mean, it might as well have come out with them years ago. Didn't really make any improvements, so just a 3 out of 10. And overall, I just gave it a 2 out of 10. This one was a big disappointment for me. I was
Wow.
like thinking, Ultra Tank, that sounds awesome. We haven't seen a mainline tank game in 2 years. And no color, no real gameplay improvements. It just feels like this is, I guess, the version you have to play if you don't have an Atari 2600.
Right.
And you're
Yeah.
probably going to want to, like, you'd rather play that version because you can play Jet Fighter on it. You can play Biplane on it. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems weird, and especially if it doesn't control much better, because I'm sure there's stuff we can't really see when we're playing emulations where like arcade cabinets of the time felt better than consoles. But I don't know. It just seems like they're like, hey, this was popular. I wonder if people would like an arcade version that's worse. And
It
I don't know. Yeah.
was definitely a letdown, I'd say. Maybe I just expect more from Atari and Key Games. I mean, they've made some of my favorite games that we've ever covered, including the original Tank and Tank 8, which had 8 tanks on the screen with color graphics, true color graphics. So, I mean, I understand maybe having a lot of variations. If this had come out before the 2600 version, maybe that'd be helpful. I mean, I think I'd still like want color and stuff, but the reality is like we've seen it before and we've seen it done better by them. So
Right. Yeah.
it's very strange. But yeah, that's Ultra Tank. Came out in February.
Very interesting. And let's move on to more strange copies of other games with our next honorable mention, Depth Bomb
Mm-hmm.
by Sega, which is a licensed version of Gremlin's Depth Charge. I don't know. That just cracks me up so much. Depth Bomb. It's like, okay, yeah. But I mean, they're not blatantly copying it, at least. It's a licensed version. So it makes
Yeah.
sense to have a similar name.
Mm-hmm. And then we have one called Game Tree. Now, I think we're going to be talking about this more next week because I believe this is Project Support Engineering's last game that they're ever going to make, which is sad. We'll talk about it next week, but made some good games. This one came out in February of 78 as well, and it's some sort of light gun hunting game. There doesn't seem to be any video or emulation of it, but it seems like your standard light gun, you're shooting rabbits and bunnies and birds and stuff.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to talk about them a little bit later, but for now, let's wrap it up with our last game on the timeline and also the game that I took a look at today, Super 21 and also Super Single 21 by Mirko, which came out in 1978. There's two different versions, hence the two different names. One was basically a cocktail cabinet with up to 4 players, so it could also play the same 1 player version as the second cabinet, which was just blackjack, 1 player versus the dealer. So basically, just different versions only in that, depending on what the market and the people wanted to buy, whether they thought a single arcade machine would do better or a cocktail table.
Mm-hmm.
It's advertised on the flyer as being just like the Las Vegas blackjack experience. And a little later in a different flyer, it is advertised as one of the most exciting games ever created, which
Wow.
honestly seems a bit much for a blackjack game. The cabinets themselves are pretty boring. It's just like the typical wood paneling kind of stuff. There's a few graphics of cards, but they're not like weird, crazy colors, 70s like we expected for a lot of these. But one nice option with the cabinets is that the operator could change the game speed. The emulator that I played this in was actually pretty quick, so I could understand wanting to have it, deal out the cards a little slower, make the rounds kind of take a while, because this could easily be the kind of game that you're playing, but you're also just having a drink, hanging out with your friends. Like the game isn't necessarily the full focus if you're playing this kind of video game blackjack, or at least I could see it being played that way.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into the gameplay for it, it's basically just blackjack, up to 4 players on the Super 21 cocktail cabinet, which is going to be the main one that I'm talking about. It did have some added rules, like different payout ratios based on your bet. If you were dealt a 21 naturally on the first hand, I think you would get a 2-to-1 payout on your ante. And I'm guessing these are all things that are in like typical casino blackjack, or at least typical blackjack of the time. It also had a double down feature where you could double your ante, or your bet for the round, but you would only draw 1 card after that. And so you couldn't keep hitting after that card.
Mm.
So if you were at like a 14 or something, you could double down, hope you draw like a 6 or a 7 to get a 21, and you would make a little bit more money off it. So nice little added detail for some extra calculated risk. And other than that, it's pretty much just a blackjack game. I mean, there's not too much you can change about that. Players could jump in and out at any point, which I really like. It kind of works with this style of blackjack like where they're trying to emulate an actual table at a casino because you could just put in a corner, somebody next to you could have 5 chips left and they're playing around, but you jump in, you have your 5 chips, and now you're dealt into the next round. So I really like that, even though it's simple. And I forget if other blackjack cocktail tables we've seen before have had that, but it just makes it feel more like an actual gambling experience, I guess. But getting into my ratings for this, for graphics, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. The suits and the numbers are pretty well detailed, but it's still all black and white. The cards are the only thing to look at on the screen other than white text, and it basically looks exactly the same as Hit Me by Ramtech, which I looked up and it came out in 1976 as well.
I was like a little worried about that. I was like, maybe this one has like it looks a little bit better. Did that one have suits on it? Me?
It did have suits on it. I looked it
Oh
back up
wow.
because I was like, how much different is it? And I would say maybe there's like a little bit more fidelity to the
Mm-hmm.
little suits and the numbers. But other than that, it's like exactly the same. Even the screen layout's pretty similar, where it's like the instructions and text are top left, your antes towards the top right, and then your cards are at the bottom with the dealer in the top middle. So it's a little weird how graphically it didn't do that much different at all. It does look okay. You could argue it's giving you all the visual information you need, but it's definitely not interesting. Like, just make the whole background green,
Yeah.
and I could at least pretend it's green felt with like white text on it, you know?
Uh-huh.
But then moving on to the sound, I give it a 0.5 out of 10. It's just beeps for cards being dealt, beeps for your ante, beeps for I forget what else, but they're all the same beep, and then a buzz when either the dealer or you bust or go over 21. And that's it. I mean, there's no tune, there's no like fake money sound when you get a bunch of points, like that kind of horrible version on the Fairchild that just like played a ding for every coin that you got,
Yeah.
which was kind of good because it made it felt like you were winning a slot machine. But this one, I mean, nothing going on for the sounds. I'm just looking at this thinking it's 1978. Like, with everything you're doing on the screen, you can't tell me there's not enough space on whatever storage you have in there to put like, I don't know, da 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 charge or like just something
Yeah.
stupid in there, you know? So really unimpressed with that. And moving on to the gameplay, I gave it a 2 out of 10. Even though it's not very flashy in all the other aspects, it still does play a pretty good game of blackjack. Everything just works the way I feel like it should. There's interesting additions like the double down feature. And really, the main thing that I like about this is the fact that it's the 4 player version. And, you could picture this being in a bar or something like that, and just like 2 people are playing. One other person comes up, gets dealt it to a hand because they put a quarter in, and then 2 people decide to leave, but the other person's still playing. I like that sort of fluid gameplay. It's not like you have to have 4 people sit down, play a game, get up, and leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that's really nice. And again, I forget if that had been in other blackjack games we've seen. I actually don't think we've seen many 4 player cocktail versions. We've seen several that were like 1 player versus dealer, but it makes it feel more authentic and kind of gives you that blackjack vibe. But then for relevance, I just gave it a 3 out of 10. It's another game from Mirko, which another one of the names that we've seen around. So I always like to see these recurring things to kind of build their story in our heads. But Super 21 just doesn't feel like anything special. I mean, it's another blackjack game. It's got slight improvements, but I just don't feel like it's very impactful. I don't see it influencing many other blackjack games other than maybe, hey, let's always have the double down feature or just like constantly adding new rules and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then overall, I gave it a 1.5 out of 10. It plays a fun game of blackjack, but the graphics and the sounds just really drag it down. And I just feel like, especially after going back and watching a video of Hit Me, it's like you have to be able to show something for being released 2 years later than a Ramtech Hit Me game. Yeah, so it's I don't know. It was an interesting one to take a look at. I do like blackjack and I like playing card games, but if at this point we don't even have like red for hearts and diamonds somewhere on the screen and like green felt in the background, I don't know. I feel like it's really lacking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that's like the whole story of today's episodes. It feels like.
Yeah, not planned at all. I mean, we got a smattering of games, excited about some of them, but then ended up kind of being disappointed with the ones on the end there. We liked Rocket Pilot all right, and we liked Swords all right, but
Yeah, but I think it's maybe just a sign of. I mean, we're in January and February, and I feel like this is like the group of games that people had ideas for, and then the executives were probably like, "No, we can't release those in November because we actually need good games to release then."
right, yeah,
And then they just come out in January and February. So I'm hoping next week. I think we're still in February. We're gonna be doing some consoles and some computer games, which will be fun. The Apple II stuff just seems kind of like next level. Anything like related to that at all? So I think it'll be pretty fun. But yeah, getting through maybe some of the not as good ones here in the early 78, but it'll happen. I've seen the future, Wes. It'll happen.
he knows. He does the research. He knows exactly what's up. And for the little bit I helped out with the research, I know there's good stuff in 78 to come. And it makes it interesting when we look back to see, hey, there were also these games that came out in 78, and who knows? Maybe they could be bad enough to make our worst for the year. But
Yeah. So with that, I think we're gonna wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. As Wes mentioned, we did review Rocket Pilot, which is a Bob Bishop lunar lander game on the Apple II, and hey, Apple II games turn out to be like pretty good. Even if they're bad games, like they're still pretty good. And then Wes kind of mentioned Swords, aka Sword Fighter, which was an old Cosmic VIP computer game and also unreleased coin operated prototype game by Joseph Weisbecker. And then I did Ultra Tank, which I think is like the biggest letdown of the episode because it's key games and man, I just expect more from them.
right,
And then Super 21, also known as Super Single 21 by Mirko, which is a blackjack game. Maybe it wasn't really marketed for like the hardcore people. I don't know, but definitely a bit of a letdown considering we're in 78 and I don't know, we just kind of expect a little bit more from them. But yeah, that'll do it for us today.
yeah, and as always, make sure to check out our website. We've just added some new stuff on there. They may be RCA Studio 2 games, but it's still worth taking a look at.
Yep.
Make sure to check out our Twitter to see if when we're uploading episodes and any other announcements that we might have. And feel free to send us an email if you have any questions.
And with that, we'll see you in the next one.
See y'all next time.